And right now, we are 2 minutes away from the end of the trading day. Romaine Bostick here with Katie Greifeld, taking you through to that closing bell. It's a global simulcast. Tim Stenovec joins us now from the radio booth. Carol Masser is still away. Emily Graffeo fills in for her today. Welcome to our audiences across all of our Bloomberg platforms, television, radio, our partnership with YouTube here on an 8th straight day of gains for the benchmark S&P 500, Tim Stenovec.
Yeah, looking like it's going to be an 8th straight day. There were some questions about what would happen earlier in the session. But still, the S&P 500 up 0.3%, off its best levels of the day. I'm still watching oil, which is still rising today, more than $92 a barrel for WTI. Brent futures at more than $95 a barrel. Both of those up more than, wow, look at that. WTI up more than 5%, almost 6%, and Brent up, Emily, 4.6%.
And for a day that tech is doing so well, one asset class selling off is Bitcoin. The cryptocurrency really hasn't participated in the recent rally. Tim and I were just discussing how it's been a little bit on the back seat.
Yeah, it's been interesting to see it sort of break apart from some of those asset classes and specifically those equities that it had been closely tracking. I couldn't tell you what exactly the narrative is in crypto right now, but that's Tim's job tomorrow at noon. I will say it's interesting to see what's going on with oil prices right now, rising once again, not necessarily taking a dent out of this equity market. In fact, boosting the energy sector, which is just one of two sectors managing to climb today.
Just a reminder, we are going to get some earnings after the bell. This from Hewlett-Packard Enterprise. And of course, at the tail end of this week, we get that big monthly jobs report here in the U.S. So two potential catalysts for this market as we get the closing bells in New York, with the majority of stocks across this tape actually in the red, but the right amount of stocks, and more importantly, the right complexion of stocks are in the green. And so you're looking at record highs pretty much across the board. The Dow Jones Industrial Average adding about 47 points or 0.1%. The S&P 500 closing out the day right around that 7,600 level, 20 points higher or 0.25 percentage point higher. The NASDAQ Composite up about 0.4%. The NASDAQ 100 up 0.6%. The Russell 2000, Tim, sitting this one out lower by about 0.5 percentage point.
We were talking with Matt Stuckey a few minutes ago over at Northwestern Mutual Wealth Management. He's chief portfolio manager
Love that name.
for equities there.
Yeah.
He talked about a lack of breadth, and that's kind of what we're seeing in today's session too. And we've seen that over the last few months, I think it's fair to say. We did, even though we saw the S&P 500 move higher today, we saw more stocks lower than actually higher. 213 stocks moved higher, 290 stocks, Katie, fell.
Well, that dynamic is even more dramatic when you take a look at the sector level. As I mentioned, you had just two sectors finish in the green. At least one of them was very important. Information technology higher by about 2.5%. Energy, though, also higher on the day, about 1.9% as a sector. In terms of what performed the worst, utilities down 3%, consumer discretionary down 2.6%, real estate down 1.7%. So a lot of big moves to the downside at the sector level. But again, you take a look at what gained today, that's what mattered.
All right, well, speaking of what gained today, we got to start with looking at NVIDIA and ARM. NVIDIA shares rising today. More than 6.2%. We'll go ahead and round that up, 6.3% today. ARM Holdings hitting a new intraday record today, up at its best levels, more than 20%, but closing 15.7% higher today. This after NVIDIA announced a new product that combines an ARM central processing unit, CPU, and a Blackwell generation graphics processor. We're talking about the RTX Spark Super Chip. It'll debut in laptop and desktop computers from Dell and Lenovo. It'll run Microsoft's Windows for ARM operating system. Jensen announced this in Taiwan overnight. It'll allow for, so-called AI PCs. We had a great chat with Ian King a little earlier.
How much are these things going to cost?
Oh, we don't know about that yet.
Okay.
But what we do know, and I guess also what we don't know is like what normal people will do with these AI PCs. Qualcomm's been talking about this for years, but what, given what people do on computers right now, and on their smartphones right now, in the way they interact with
I love you
LLMs.
bring up Qualcomm, because I'd also like to point out that Cristiano Amon, the CEO of Qualcomm, was also on that same stage, and nobody's talking about them for some reason, because they basically have the same thing.
At last check, they do. And at last check, shares of Qualcomm were down more than 8%.
Yeah.
But I haven't looked in the last couple hours. Also, MGM Resorts International today, shares surging. This after we learned Barry Diller has made an offer for the remaining portion of MGM Resorts International he doesn't already own, finishing the day up more than 16%. The proposal is for the 74%, we'll call it, of MGM resorts that it doesn't already own. It values the company at $18.8 billion, including debt. Diller believes the market, quote, materially undervalues the power and durability of MGM assets, which have real-world assets that AI cannot easily replicate or disintermediate, and exceptional digital growth opportunities. Once again, MGM Resorts up by 16% today. And finally, how about a little movie theater? I don't know, AMC Entertainment, 22.5% higher today. We saw several movie theater stocks actually move higher today after a record box office weekend for the independent distributor of Backrooms, closing out the strong May lineup. AMC shares, they're heavily shorted. They said that after yet another strong weekend at the box office in May, they have seen the highest attended month of May going back to 2019.
Have you seen this movie yet?
I have not seen it.
Emily, Graffeo,
I have not seen any movies, Romaine.
I know. Well, you have tiny kids. So
Yeah.
all you're watching are cartoons.
I watched Marty Supreme on HBO Max a few
How
weeks
was
ago.
it?
That
With
was
your
your
children?
review. That came out a while ago.
It did come out. For me, that did not come out a while ago. I thought it was fun.
Okay.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh.
Why?
Yeah.
I heard it was stressful.
Well, that's all the movies from those guys are
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not
Yeah.
fun.
You
Keeps
should
it
see
fun.
Uncut Gems. It's a love
Uncut
story.
Gems.
I'm still
Fantastic.
recovering.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right,
right.
I'm going to let Emily go.
We'll go to the decliners. Similar theme to what Tim was just talking about here, starting with Intel. Intel lower as NVIDIA enters the PC market with a new chip. So a new chip that's weighing on shares of chip makers Intel. It's also weighing on Qualcomm, as we had discussed. I picked Intel because it's a bigger market cap company, but Qualcomm did fall about 8%. Intel closing the day down about 4.6%. The shares were down about 10% in the last 5 days. Almost $27 billion in market cap erased for Intel, though, just today. I'm also looking at shares of Rocket Lab. Shares of SpaceLink stocks declined today. Rocket Lab down about 14.7%. This is all coming after a Blue Origin rocket exploded last week. So that trade in SpaceLink stocks continuing into this week. The Jeff Bezos-backed firm Blue Origin's New Glenn rocket blew up on Thursday evening while undergoing a test on a Florida launch pad. And this, of course, is ahead of its plans for it to deploy satellites for Amazon's Leo, which is a rival network to Starlink.
Yeah.
And then finally, Ford shares dropping. Sorry, Romaine.
Yeah, sorry. We're getting earnings right now out of Hewlett Packard Enterprise crossing the wire, and the shares on fire, up about 15%. A lot of questions as to whether they would be participating, of course, in this AI boom. Net revenue in the most recent quarter up 40% to $10.7 billion. The street was looking for 9.7, so basically came in about $1 billion over that. Networking revenue was the star of the show, $2.69 billion. That's up from about $1.1 billion the previous year here. So a huge acceleration in growth there. Adjusted EPS also beat 79 cents a share. The street was looking for 54 cents. Here's your forecast for the full year. The company says expected adjusted EPS $3.35 to $3.45 a share. That's more than $1 more than what it had previously guided for on both the top and low end of that range. It sees free cash flow of $3.5 billion for the full year, up from its previous guidance of $2 billion. So you get the story here. This is a company projecting a huge acceleration in growth, and you now see those shares accelerating up 24% in the after hours trade.
Yeah, just amazing. Let's talk about the shares a little bit more here because, I mean, heading into these results, today alone we saw HPE shares rise by more than 9%. For the full year, for 2026 year to date, shares higher by 97% on a total return basis. There was this idea out there that maybe HP Enterprise, maybe they faced a high bar after what we saw from Dell, but clearly if that bar was set even higher, they seem to surpass that. At least take a look at the after shares reaction here, higher by nearly 25% at this point.
Okay, you guys are watching what's happening with Hewlett Packard Enterprise. I'm watching what's happening after hours with Credo Tech, which going into today's print, shares were up this year by close to 60%. Shares getting, I wouldn't say crushed given what they've done this year, but still down double digits right now. Fourth quarter revenue coming in just above estimates at $437 million. But let's look at the first quarter outlook. Sees first quarter revenue $465 to $475. That comes in above estimates of $460 million. Sees first quarter adjusted gross margin above estimates at 67 to 69%. The estimate was for 65%. I guess not enough for the high hopes that investors had going into this. Shares down about 12.5% in the after hours. But again, this shares up significantly this year, close to 60%.
All right. Well, given some of that back here in the after hours trade, let's take a quick look at yields because that could become a bigger part of the broader market story. We saw after 7 straight days of declines in benchmark Treasury yields, we actually saw them rise today on the 10-year. You see only slightly there, up about 2 basis points. Similar story for the 30-year yield, which had been down for 7 straight sessions. Your 2-year yield getting more of the action. That's up about 3 basis points. And obviously a lot of that tied to that big move higher that we saw earlier today in oil.
Okay, well, we'll see what oil does tomorrow, and we'll see what we get out of the latest when it comes to the conflict tomorrow.